instructions. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of approving a continuing resolution to maintain a level and consistent funding stream for our federal government. It's one of our primary constitutional responsibilities as members of Congress to keep the federal government running through the passage of appropriations legislation. This continuing resolution will ensure that all necessary and vital functions of government will continue uninterrupted until both chambers of our legislature have completed their work. If we do not act now, Mr. Speaker, the federal government will effectively shut down this Friday, December 3rd. This continuing resolution is a short-term, straightforward measure to keep the government running and get us through the next 2 weeks till December 18th while bipartisan negotiations continue in the House and the Senate. It's my hope that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle will work with us to move this important bill forward and to pass a clean continuing resolution contained under this rule. This continuing resolution will fund the federal government at levels already approved by the House in fiscal year 2010 appropriations bill and the fiscal year 2009 supplemental bill. This includes extending the authority for the Department of Defense to execute the Commander's Emergency Response Program, an essential tool for military commanders in Iraq and Afghanistan. It would also continue the application period for retroactive stop-loss benefits through the duration of the continuing resolution. The retroactive stop-loss pay program provides $500 for each month served in stop-loss status, with an average benefit of $3,700 to the brave servicemen and women, veterans and beneficiaries of those whose service was involuntarily extended under stop-loss. This continuing resolution would also continue to fund VA hospitals already under construction, including one in my home state of Colorado, the Denver VA Hospital, which serves 58,000 veterans living in Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, and Wyoming. Millions of veterans and their families across this nation depend on the VA for medical care and support. And we must pass this CR so we continue to build these much-needed facilities. Absent this CR, construction on these VA facilities will grind to a halt, leaving our veterans in the lurch. Our veterans took an oath to defend our country, and they deserve to come home to better care and a quality hospital that meets their needs. This CR would also allow the Federal Air Marshals to maintain the existing fiscal year 2010 fourth quarter coverage levels for international and domestic flights. This funding will allow for continued training, including investigative techniques, criminal terrorist behavior, firearms proficiency, aircraft-specific tactics, and self-defense measures that are necessary to protect the flying public. This funding allows the Federal Air Marshals to fulfill their mission of protecting air passengers and crew. Protecting our nation and combating terrorism is a top priority for this Congress, and without the passage of this CR, those efforts with regard to our air marshals will grind to a halt, leaving the traveling public at greater risk. This continuing resolution would also ask the Commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Security to maintain the level of Customs and Border Protection personnel in place for the final quarter and the final few weeks of fiscal year 2010. This provides proper funding to keep terrorists and their weapons out of the United States, secure and facilitate trade and travel, and enforce hundreds of U.S. regulations, including immigration and drug laws. U.S. Customs and Border Protection law enforcement professionals serve as America's frontline defense on our nation's borders, at ports of entry, field stations, and checkpoints across the United States. It's important that we maintain a consistent level of personnel at our nation's borders. By interrupting these funds, we would be jeopardizing Customs and Border Protection's ability to do their job and protect America. This funding enables these officers to inspect our borders, process trade, combat terrorism and smuggling. A vote against this continuing resolution is a vote to gut our border security when we need it the most. In addition to extending the existing authority for the Department of Homeland Security to regulate chemical facilities to prevent high levels of risk, this continuing resolution would also extend the existing Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, authority to provide technical and financial assistance to states and localities for pre-disaster hazard mitigation activities. As an example, in my home state of Colorado, this continuing resolution would mean keeping in place vital programs like the 2008 Colorado Springs Wildfire Mitigation Project that removed and removes vegetation around critical facilities and communities, the 2008 Denver Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan, which assists 37 communities, townships, and counties in the Denver metro area in analyzing and assessing their hazard risks, to 2007 Coal Creek Crossing, affecting the town of Erie in Boulder County, Colorado, flood reduction project that helps the town of Erie modify infrastructure around the Coal Creek Crossing to eliminate future damages. My district, Mr. Speaker, recently suffered one of the worst forest fires in the history of Colorado, which completely destroyed over 100 residences. These emergencies can strike anywhere, anytime, and if we failed to pass this continuing resolution, we would cripple the ability of the federal government to help with emergencies wherever they occur and whatever their nature is. This continuing resolution would also maintain the additional $23 million in funding for the Department of Interior's new Bureau of Ocean Energy Management for increased inspections for offshore oil rigs. In light of the recent disaster we all witnessed unfold this summer in the Gulf of New Mexico, these funds should be the last thing that we want to allow to expire or to cut. These funds are critical to ensure that tragedies like the Deepwater Horizon spill are not repeated and that our oil rigs are inspected. These funds allow existing rigs to continue operating in a manner that protects the workers on the rigs and the sensitive environmental areas in which these rigs operate, as well as protect our economy from future job loss. Interrupting these funds would put offshore oil rig workers' lives in danger, the environment in danger, our economy in danger as well. This continuing resolution before us also maintains the current rate of the Foreign Military Financing FMF program to include the $965 million that was advanced for Israel, Egypt, and Jordan in the fiscal year 2009 supplement. By providing assistance and aid to our allies in the Middle East, we strengthen our position and make a vital investment in global and national security. A vote against this continuing resolution is a vote to cut off aid to our allies like Israel in the Middle East at a time when they are critical for the global fight against terrorism and to prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons to Iran. Through this continuing resolution, we also continue the rate of operations for the Pakistan counterinsurgency capability for $1 million. This section also includes the terms and conditions in fiscal year 2009 and 2010 supplementals, which help build and maintain the counterinsurgency capability of Pakistan under the same terms and conditions. Mr. Speaker, I have not been a supporter of the escalation of efforts in Afghanistan or in Iraq. But, Mr. Speaker, I think there's a strong bipartisan consensus in this body that assisting the government of Pakistan in counterinsurgency efforts is one of the most critical fronts to protect Americans from terrorism, from a resurgence of the Taliban, and from allowing al-Qaeda a foothold in that area. There are vital programs that we must continue to fund without interruption. There may be some who question the need for a CR. Let me remind everyone that with the exception of fiscal years 89, 1995, and 1997, at least one continuing resolution has been enacted for each fiscal year since 1955. I encourage my colleagues to support the necessary rule for this CR, as well as the underlying CR, to prevent the federal government from shutting down, jeopardizing our allies and friends across the world, as well as the safety and security of Americans. And I reserve the balance.